Hi, everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Jenn, I love the energy. Two books that you should read right now or immediately when Jenn and I are sharing them.
That's right. Exactly. As soon as we're done, like the minute you hit the end of this video, you should read them.
Yeah, but that would have been a really long title for a podcast show. So we just say read this now. Yeah.
That's right. But we want to convey the urgency that we feel around this.
Yeah, I feel like we've done that. I feel like we have that established. We were talking before the show and I said, Jenn, my reading bucket has been overflowing lately. I have just been connecting to books that I'm gushing about and loving. And she's like, Brad, showtime. And here we are. So,
that's right. I can't wait to hear.
All right. I feel like we almost have a routine. Is it okay if I start?
Please do it.
Okay. So do you like books, Jenn, that kind of, they're not about life, like it might be a microcosm or topical or about kind of an activity, but yet the author conveys life messages and things that you learn from that activity?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've yet to meet a book type that I don't like, but that sounds fun. Tell me more.
I wasn't intending to ask a loaded question, but I know, like, if they're written well, I actually really enjoy, even if it's an obscure thing like welding or shoveling the driveway. That might be a little weird, but life lessons, as long as it's real and poignant and authentic, it's like, wow, that is so cool. Anyway, this book is way better than I just started out. Those were horrible examples. This book is about how the world of poker, specifically Texas Hold'em, the author went deep into the world of poker and extrapolated not like how to win at poker, although there's some stuff in there about that, but it's really about the fascinating psychology of poker and how it actually connects to like things that you and I do on a regular basis. It's just fascinating. Sure. So it's called The Biggest Bluff because I guess in poker sometimes you bluff. I saw someone online in your neck of the woods, John Spencer, he had tweeted out that he was reading this and it just caught my eye for whatever reason. So Maria Konnikova is a psychologist, and before writing the book, she, I don't think, had ever played poker. So long story short, she approached a world famous poker player, like one of the best in the world, and just kind of asked she shared her background, which was really interesting to him. And the fact that she's not like a mathematical prodigy, because in the world of poker right now, I guess a lot of the emphasis is on math and odds and probability. He was fascinated by the fact that she was looking at the psychology behind how people show up to the poker table. So he actually willingly mentored her and gave her exclusive access to his strategy and mentored her over the course of a year. Long story short, fascinating to be in that world and hear like the highs, the lows, the things that she learned, and also the misnomers or assumptions. I've heard people talk about tells before, like, oh, you have a tell. So then, I would play friends at cards and try to figure out what their tells are. It reminds me a little bit when I was in middle school and that arm wrestling movie came out with Sylvester Stallone, or I forget who it was. And all my friends we'd go to sleepovers and be like arm wrestling each other. Over the top is what the movie was. So now I'm reliving in high school how we would all try to play poker and look at each other's tells. Well, as it turns out, I was looking for the wrong thing, because tells aren't necessarily like people twitching or winking or things like that. In fact, she gets into the psychology and other research that a lot of tells are actually with the hands or even behaviors leading up to how people play a hand. Like how do what decision making goes into if you're going to try to lie or bluff. And similarly, you can see how confidence changes and behavior changes and just showing up every day. So I'm geeking out a little bit. I'm getting into the minutia of this. I do want to highly, highly recommend this. This was an incredible lead. And I found myself just kind of reflecting on how I show up each day as I'm interacting with people. And admittedly, I probably have been accused of being too trusting in my life. And this helped me understand, I don't know, it opened my eyes a teeny bit to that there's a big world out there and some things to just kind of learn about through the eyes of a psychologist, but also a poker player. So
it's so funny because we don't need to schoolify every book. Like not every book needs to be about school, right? But
right.
as you were talking, I was thinking about how, like, even as people who work with kids or someone in your role who deals with teachers, there are probably times when you have to try to not let your anxiety show to the, you know what I mean, to the point that it might be because of something that's happening on campus or in the world or whatever, because you have to keep your staff or your classroom calm and feeling safe and all of that kind of stuff. And I always found that, like, my kiddos could read right through when I was trying to be a little more calm than I really was, and I'm sure they had picked up on all my tells by the time we got to even middle semester, whatever. But that sounds like a fun book.
Yeah, if you'll allow me to indulge in just
Sure.
a couple other geeky elements of this, I thought it was fascinating because poker you might think is a game of gambling and chance, which arguably it is, but she was saying you could win with the worst hand at the table and lose with the best hand. So there actually is skill in how you show up and play and interact and what you notice. A big part of the book is just noticing and listening, slowing things down and paying attention. Like that actually makes a difference. There's one other
Interesting.
thing. Yeah. We'll talk later about this. But for anyone, it's not even like a poker fan book. It's really just a book about looking at life differently. Really, really cool.
Well, and I'm a big fan of John Spencer too. So if the two of you are both recommending it, then that's a double win for me. I love it.
Yeah, I am going to share a 10-second John Spencer story. I wasn't planning this, but since he recommended this, like I remember years and years ago, I had a question about how do you make those cool stuff, just the cool art that he does. He was nice enough just to say, hey, I'll hop on a call and walk you like a Google Hangout and gave freely of his time just to connect. I'm like, what an outstanding human being. So
he's very generous and authentic, and I enjoy him a lot. And it's nice because you said we are sort of in the same neck of the woods. He's in Oregon and I'm in Washington. And even though our paths don't cross all that often, especially in the last couple of years, they certainly have more than when I was on the East Coast. So it's nice.
Yeah, cool.
That's
well,
awesome.
Jen, I'm excited. This was my just kind of adult. I
love it.
I wouldn't see recommending this to an elementary student, but anyway, what do you got
but
for
you know
us?
having not read that book, I will just say that when I was a high school librarian and a high school teacher, many of my students enjoyed books, especially nonfiction books that were written for an adult audience. So I could see some high school librarians being interested in checking that out, maybe.
Oh, there is that element. So take me back to high school. If I were in high school and was a real tryhard at playing cards against my friends, I would have pored over this book multiple times, not for the life lessons, but there actually are some really cool card teaching stuff that wasn't even on my radar back then. So
cool. So fun. Well, I'm going to pivot to like the exact opposite. If you're talking about books for adults and maybe high school readers, and I'm going to share a couple of, you heard me right, I'm going to share 2 books today. I'm breaking all of the rules. I know it's crazy, right? But I wanted to share a book that just came out not that long ago, but it made me want to reread this author's related book that came out a couple of years ago with the same characters. They're not sequels, you can read them independently, but because I love those characters so much, it made me want to reread the first book. And so I wanted to share both of them. So I don't know if you are familiar with Deborah Marcero's In a Jar. Do you know this book, Brad?
I don't, but the art looks familiar.
Well, this book came out in 2020 and it got a lot. I'm going to show the back cover too, because look how sweet it is. It got a lot of buzz that year, rightfully so. The illustrations are just gorgeous. I'll do our friend John Shue's trick and remove the dust jacket in order to show you the case cover, which gives us kind of a little clue as to what the book is about. I want you to see there's a bunny there on the front end. That's our friend Llewellyn. And then this is his friend Evelyn, who's on the back, and you can see all of these like goodies sort of being collected. The book is called In a Jar, And the first book is about these two friends. So it starts out with Llewellyn, who is a collector. He likes to go and collect things in jars, leaves, bugs, whatever. He's a collector. And then he meets Evelyn and she begins collecting with him. And they start to collect all sorts of things, things that are usual, like seashells, and then also some unusual things like rainbows and stars and things like that. They begin to collect really their memories together in these jars. But then one day something sad happens. Evelyn has to move away. And so when she moves, Llewellyn is very sad, but they begin to realize that they can still collect and send each other what they're seeing in their jars so that they can still be connected. And it's just a sweet, sweet little book. That's the first one. And, it's got some fantastical elements, but really it's just about how like what binds you to someone isn't necessarily physical space, but the connections you share in other ways, right? And then you can see on the back, it says friendship is magic. And then again, there's that little Evelyn and Llewellyn on the back. So I love that book. And then when the new one came out this year, Out of a Jar, I was real excited to read it because I love the first one so much. And then something crazy happened, which is I think I love the second one even more, which I didn't think was even possible because I really, really loved In a Jar. But I want to show you, that's the book I really wanted to book talk today. I'll show you the cover here. This one's called Out of a Jar. And we can see our friend Llewellyn on the cover. I want to show you the dust jacket, that was the dust jacket, the hard case here. The case cover, and you can see there's more jars, but these look a little different than the jars on the first one. And I could see myself with kids asking them to make predictions, like what might Llewellyn be putting in the jars this time? What would you guess those are based just on the case cover, right? And what we learn is that in this book, Llewellyn is learning how to deal with his feelings. He feels something uncomfortable. He doesn't know what to do with it. So he puts that feeling in the jar. It starts by putting the feeling of being scared in the jar and then sticking it up on the shelf. And he says, that's that. I don't have to feel that anymore. But then as time goes on, he starts putting all of his feelings in the jar. When he feels embarrassed, when he feels hungry, when he feels alone, when he feels angry, he starts putting all of those angry or those negative, I'm going to put negative in quotes, emotions into a jar and putting them on the shelf so he doesn't have to feel them anymore. But as he continues to put his feelings in jars, it bleeds over to the positive emotions too. He no longer knows how to deal with any feelings. So he starts bottling them all up. He starts putting them in jars until the jars can just no longer contain his feelings. And he learns that the best way to deal with feelings is not to hide them, but to share them and to talk to people about them, etc. And I love the book so much because, I want to show you some of these illustrations. First, this is one of my favorite illustrations. I'm guessing you can relate to this, Brad, because this is when Llewellyn feels loneliness. And I absolutely love that it's loneliness in a very crowded space. So it's possible you don't have to be alone to feel lonely, do you?
That is right? Genius.
I know. I love that so much. And I felt like I could relate to that, right? And then later on, I'll read this section to you because it's one of my favorites. It says, soon he had so many jars filled with so many emotions that Llewellyn walked around not feeling much of anything at all. And you can see all of his jars with his emotions, right? And here he is on the second page, not feeling anything at all. Then something happens. I won't give away what that is, but the jars can no longer hold all of his emotions. Llewellyn tried to push and shove and shut his feelings away. Tears of frustration leaked out and something rumbled deep inside of him. Suddenly, crack. All those jars hiding all those feelings shattered. And I want you to look at this spread. Like, isn't that gorgeous, Brad? And I'll kind of go through
Mm.
But what I love there is I noticed and picked up on how all of the emotions, even those ones that are scary, make a rainbow. And that's beautiful, right? And then the very last one of his emotions to leak out is fear, which is down there at the bottom. You can see it's kind of it's a beautiful scene. And then Llewellyn decides to talk to someone about his emotions, and that's what helps most of all. So, and recently, a lot of people have been asking me about books that might help young people deal with a scary time in the world, because we've been dealing with some pretty scary stuff in the world over the last few years, and even as this show is being recorded over the last several days. It's been a crazy time in the world, and people have been asking me for books that might help kids deal with that. And that's what made me want to share Out of a Jar today. It's by Deborah. I want to make sure I get this, Marcero. And not only does it, I think that not only is it a beautiful book that kids of all ages might be interested in reading, but I think it opens up a lot of conversation about what we can do when we have feelings that feel uncomfortable. That might be a healthy choice for that. So I think you should read this right now.
Incredible share. And I'm taking notes here. Mental note, share 2 books every time. I feel like the cat's on the bag. I have permission. No, just kidding.
I know. It's like, good. Oh, I'm going to break a rule.
I love the diversity in what we just shared. Just so vastly different, but both really beautiful and interesting at the same time. Important. So cool, Jen.
I love it. You know where else there's a lot of diversity in terms of the books we've shared? It's in our archive, Brad, where we have kept all of the books we've shared over the last, count them, almost 4 years. If our friends, our 3.5 viewers, would like to look through those, where can they go?
Yeah, I would definitely check out bit.ly/read_this_now for a plethora and wide variety of books. And not just the video, but just there's a great list too with hot links. Are they called hot links, URLs? What are we calling these things these days?
That sounds like a hot take. Or maybe you've been having too much hot dish. Isn't that a Minnesota thing?
It is. I don't know if I can compete with this stream of brilliance, but yes.
I don't know. I think hot link is like what we called them in circa of 2004, perhaps. But that's all right.
If you want to get on your... Yeah, there you go.
I love it. I love it.
You're
all right,
amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
And safe travels to you. Always great to connect.
You too, my friend. And to all of our viewers, thank you. Happy reading.